It's 2014. Wow, just wow. Here's why that's a problem, shitlord. Welcome to Common Filth Radio. Thank you very much for listening. If you were not yet aware, this show follows a question and answer format. You send in a question to me, and I answer it. You can send me your questions at my email, which is commonfilth@commonfilth.com. You may send me a message through YouTube or any of my Facebook pages if you're familiar with those. In the 6 weeks that I've been doing this podcast, I've received a lot of different reactions, mostly positive, but the negative ones are just usually just calling me names like virgin, homo, homophobe, racist, sexist, Nazi, Pole, politically incorrect poster, which I think is pretty weird. 6 years ago, instead of telling me to go back to Pole, they would tell me to go back to church because I'm a Bible thumping, hateful, bigoted Christian creationist. And I would find that insult very strange as well because I've been called euphoric and a fedora wearer and a neckbeard, and which is odd because I've established that I'm no kind of atheist, internet atheist or otherwise. People tend to take the path of least resistance, and the path of least resistance is usually dismissing somebody with a one-word insult, associating with you with something they don't like, which might not even be true, but in their own head it is. It's a lot easier to just cut somebody down by being dismissive and shitty. It actually takes effort to be constructively critical. But I'm repeating myself, and we already knew that, so let's move on. This week we're going to open up with a question seeking some advice. The original plan was to have episode 2 be an advice show, but that fell through because nobody wanted my advice. But somebody wants my advice here, and I'm going to do my best to give it. This message is from Christian, if I didn't get the names mixed up. And Christian writes, "My best friend has been doing very questionable things recently. He has been depressed for most of his life. His father left when he was young, and his grandmother, who takes care of him, is always yelling and screaming. His mother is busy helping his 3 other siblings, so she has no time to be with him. And when she is with him, she doesn't listen to his problems. He is basically alone when it comes to family. But anyway, he got a girlfriend for the first time in his life, and then when he was attached to her and she dumped him, this combined with his previous problems sent him into a spiral. He started smoking weed and stopped hanging out with his friends. And his girlfriend that started all this got back together with him, and it's obvious that they won't end well. I've tried to talk some sense into him, but I just can't get through to him. I feel like my best friend is growing distant and is going through severe soul degradation. Have you ever been in a situation like this? And if so, is there anything you can do to help that person? Thanks." I'm very sorry to hear that your friend's going through a rough patch. I have known people who have not been in the exact situation, but have been doing the wrong things, knowing full well that they're wrong. That's the definition of a fool. Fools generally have to learn the hardest way, and that's to make the mistake, experience the consequences of it, and hopefully through the healing of time, they'll be able to get some wisdom from it. The worst thing that you can do in your situation right now is react very harshly in the heat of the moment. Usually when you do that, the person you're telling to not do these things that they're doing, they'll keep doing them and then do something worse just to spite you. Because I'm pretty sure that your friend already knows that what he's doing will not end well, will not set him upon the right path. So I can guarantee you that your friend is living in denial despite the fact that he knows at some level that things are not going to go well on his current path. The best thing you can do is give him some space, let the problems manifest themselves fully, and leave the door open. Just give him emotional space, but always leave that door open to be approached and to be a friend. Even though it might not be tomorrow, the next day, or the day after that, when this comes to its eventual catastrophic conclusion, he will need somebody eventually, and he's going to need somebody to lean on, and it sounds like you're close enough to this person where you can be qualified to do that. It seems hardest to do nothing at this point, but there's really nothing that you can do other than wait it out and wait for him to realize what he has done. Men and women, we deal with experience differently. Bad things happen to men, but generally, more often than not, we recover from it. We're able to sift it, that we're able to sift through the sands of time and get out those little nuggets of wisdom. It might hurt a lot in the months immediately following the traumatic event, but we eventually recover. I don't think your friend will turn out any different. I think that he will eventually learn from his mistakes and move on with his life and will be able to carve out a decent existence for himself. So let him know that you don't approve of it in whatever way you see fit, but don't harp on it. Always be there for him and be a good friend and lead by example because in time he will be very thankful for that. So feel free to adjust that advice to your specific situation, and I hope it works out well for him. I certainly hope he gets his head on straight and that you can continue your friendship. Nipple piercings. More like, I'm a damaged cock slut who's trying to fuck my daddy issues away. Couple that with a Skrillex haircut, and you're looking at somebody that does anal on the first date. I recommend that you avoid ladies like that, but if you're of a mind to, I can't stop you from being a deviant scum. So, but you're gonna have to live with yourself. Next question is brought to you by Chad. With the spawn of all of the technological advances within the 21st century, internet, smartphones, etc., how do you think these newer means of contacting individuals and broad audiences will affect the basic structure of communication and societal behavior in the future? Do you think it will advance people's ability to function within communities inside and outside of the internet, or lead people to more likely become followers with less capability to think for themselves? Technology creates severe atomization and extreme individualism that leads to a lot of the crazy subcultures you're seeing pop up on places like Tumblr. Instead of being embedded within a pre existing community and having to meet the standards of that community, they can just go find out crazy communities of their own in the digital world that just affirm all their psychosis. In the physical realm, there is a very strong chance of rejection within a community if they find you to be crazy and unhinged and a danger to the people around you. With that in mind, the only place where they can function, if you can call it functional, is within their own crazy community of dysfunctional people that they don't know in real life. The fact that these people are allowed to think for themselves and act upon their crazy impulses is proof that they don't deserve the capacity to do so. So, once upon a time, these people would have communities and neighbors that they would have to be held accountable to, and they'd let go of some of their craziness because they don't want to alienate the people who actually care about them and know them and who actually have a vested interest in keeping them on the straight and narrow. So they'd have to make some concessions, they'd have to compromise a little bit, and that's a good thing. You should be on the same page with the people around you. But hey, who needs that when you can start a blog, get involved with some people who will just say whatever you're doing is good just because you're doing it, because you agree with their craziness. So I think that the internet is not helping at all. It's just allowing people to divulge in their weaknesses. If through the internet people are becoming either more independent or more herd oriented, it's leading them down the same path of destruction, from what I see. Someone pointed out to me in a question that I'm going to answer pretty soon here that in episode 2 I answered a lot of questions about gays and homos, or whatever you want to call them, and I said that I didn't want to answer any more of them, but I realized I get a lot of new listeners every week, and most of those people probably don't want to go back and listen to all the old episodes, which is fine by me. There might have been some things on the subject that I neglected to mention or did not explain well enough the first time around, so I have a couple of questions about sodomites here that I will happily answer and use this opportunity to explain myself further and maybe clear some things up that I didn't before. This question was sent by email from Alaric, which I believe is the pronunciation, but if it's not, feel free to correct me. On episode 6, you referred to gay rights as a form of narcissism because it entailed human individuals improving something other than themselves. Would you say that women's suffrage helped by men and the abolition of slavery helped by non-slaves are also forms of crass individualism? Before I answer the question, I meant to say quote unquote crass individualism because those are my words, not theirs. Don't want to put words into anybody's mouth. I think I misspoke, or at least left something out of my point that I was making last week, in that a lot of millennials are drawn to the gay rights thing is because they see a lot of gay people in themselves, and I think homosexuality is a form of narcissism. Homosexual relationships are what I perceive to be dysfunctional because you're essentially being paired with somebody that's exactly the same thing as you. Maybe not exactly in personality, but in terms of equipment. They also share a common sexual drive, which is to seek out those with the same equipment, even though they are biologically incompatible. So that's what I meant by it's another form of individualism. It's another form of narcissism, both homosexuality and homophilia. I don't think that gay rights or homophilia is at all related to women's suffrage enabled by men or the abolition of slavery by non slaves. Even the most 1488 Heil Hitleranist white nationalist son of a bitch doesn't like the idea of slavery. But that's a different aside. I think that women's suffrage brought on a lot of negative effects to the democratic process because it brought a lot of people into voting rights that really had no business having any skin in the game. I'm all for landowners. And whether you say that, oh, women couldn't own land, that's fine. I don't have a problem with women owning land, but generally, man was the head of the household and it was one household, one vote. But the one commonality between slavery, as in African slavery, African slaves brought over here by Jewish slave traders to America, and women not being able to vote, is that there's nothing you can do about being black or being a woman. That's simply how you're born. So I can understand wanting a level playing field for people who can't do much to change who they are. Whether you believe that gays are born gay or have no choice in being gay or not, it's different from being a woman and being a black in that homosexuality is ultimately a behavior. You cannot be a homosexual unless you engage in the behavior. And last I checked, yes, there are anti sodomy laws, or were in some places, some municipalities, some states. I'm not quite sure on the current status of that. But those kinds of laws are basically impossible to enforce. So even if it were a felony, that would be the only thing precluding gays from voting, is being a felon. And we've established that it's basically impossible to get caught for engaging in sodomy, unless you're doing it on a park bench or in a men's restroom, as they so often do. The ultimate point here is that they're gay, and even though they are gay, they're still able to vote. They're still able to own land. The only thing that they really can't do is go get married in some places. And gay marriages are a sham anyway because they can't be consummated. And even though they can't get that license, what's precluding them from living as married? What's precluding them from having that ceremony? But the reason they don't do that is because marriage-minded gays are in the smaller minority embedded within the already small minority that gays already are. It's something like in California, like 2% of all gays in California have gotten married. Very small percentage. So no, I don't view slavery, the abolition of slavery, and women's suffrage as the same thing at all. I did forget to include the second paragraph that Alaric sent me there, just to be fair to Alaric. The second paragraph of Alaric's email said, I've been watching the show and I don't really agree with much you have to say about sexual deviancy, but I agree with your view on feminism and crazy-ass Tumblrites. Even though I don't agree with less than half of what you say, I like to get opposite views on politics because I think it makes me a better rounded person. It'd be great if you responded. Keep up the good work. So we can disagree on things, and I get it's not entirely fair that I have a voice and I don't bring anybody on here for a debate, but I encourage everybody, even if they still disagree with me, and if they want to make a counterpoint to my counterpoint, feel free to email me and we'll continue a dialogue. And just tell me if you don't want it on the show or not. We can send emails back and forth. That's fine. I simply think, like I've stated before, that it's a lot better to send monologues back and forth rather than just screaming over each other, like on the cable news networks. So yeah, I know it's like I'm able to frame whatever I want on here in whatever way I can, but again, that's not entirely fair, and yeah, I end up feeling a little bad about it. So Email me and alleviate my guilt. Anyway, I'll shut up about this and get into the next question. Next question is from Stuart. And it goes. Hey, Filth, like your show. I don't necessarily agree on every point you make, but I am glad to see you encourage discussion rather than doing what these Tumblr types do and basically try to suppress any opinion that differs from theirs. I do, however, agree that there are a lot of issues that people like to glorify as social progress that are not progressive at all, but are making things worse. I personally believe that the cultural diversity in Western nations is actually causing more radical or more racial and cultural conflict than anything before. Misspoke there. Anyways, my question to you is, what are your thoughts on the concept of love? Do you think that the idea that two humans can love each other is a strong emotional bond, or is it purely sexual? Also, do you think that homosexual couples could experience love in the same respects as a heterosexual couple would? Hope to hear you answer it on your show and keep up the great work. I don't know whether or not homosexual couples can experience love with each other as I've experienced love because I am not homosexual. But my judgment of homosexuality is very independent of whether or not they love each other. It's simply a behavior whose lifestyle is associated with a lot of negative things that I've seen. My views of homosexuality are that it's counter to nature, and I know homosexuality observed in species, whatever. It's the minority, significant minority. I believe that it's damaging and ultimately counterintuitive. And don't give me that bullshit about the penguin thing. Not you specifically, but anybody who might be listening. I know about the two dads of the penguin, okay? But guess what? Penguins like to fuck dead penguins. Penguins are not a moral authority on anything. As for whether the love you're talking about is purely emotional or sexual, I think that you can't have one without the other, at least as far as I've experienced it. As for whether homosexuals can love each other or not, as maybe they do, maybe they don't, I don't know. They're very different from the rest of us. So maybe that's not the answer you're looking for because it's not very definitive, but I'm being honest, and I think honesty is the best policy. So thank you for your question. Okay, the last one from this set is from Blake. I mentioned his question briefly, at least a part of it, earlier, so here we go. And this is to Blake. I know that you sent me two questions. I'm going to save one for next week, though, because they're actually very different questions. So I don't know if I can make up a good segue, even though I don't really make up segues at all. So here we go. Again. I know in episode 2 you stated that you wouldn't answer any more questions on homosexuality, so I apologize in advance for this question. But do you think homosexuality is evolution's way of saying, holy shit, dog, stop humping for babies? Excluding the fact that I am pretty sure you believe that homosexuality is a choice. I actually differ on that a little bit, with regard to people who are of my same political stripe that people seem to lump me in with. Not that I identify in any particular way, but I let other people do that. Labels are stupid, at least self-labeling. Evolution has a lot of other ways of saying, quit having so many babies. It's usually either taking out some members of the gene pool through absolute chance, like a rock falling on a coyote in the middle of the desert, you know. Nothing you can do to control that, but it happens. And there are certainly, like, birth defects that allow the death of certain members of a species. Like humans, we are actually empathetic towards the mentally retarded. Other species, not so much. Like I had a dog once. Very good dog. She was a great dog. But we'd go over and take her to see the neighbor dogs. They had two. One was actually deaf and blind in one eye, and my dog hated this dog, but liked their other one, because she could sense that that dog was defective in some way. So humans take pity on the defective. We have the empathy gland. Dogs and other creatures that are baser creatures, they don't have that too much. But what does this have to do with whether homosexuality is some sort of evolutionary pressure? In male homosexuals, you can actually observe it. They have a neotenous sort of mannerism and speech, and yeah, you don't see that too much in female homosexuals, lesbians, because I think that's a farce. Gay face is also a real thing. A lot of people are able to tell just by looking at somebody's face whether they're gay or not with respect to males. So that leads me to believe that there is at least some sort of if not genetic basis for homosexuality, certainly a developmental one, and that's where my opinion is. I don't think that it's either completely genetic or completely environmental. I think there are certain genetic triggers that can be activated by environmental pressures that cause somebody to develop as a homosexual or lack of development, as it were. As for whether or not that's evolution's way of saying stop having babies or don't have babies, I don't know. It could very well be, but you bring up a good question, and maybe I provided some food for thought there that that you can use to further develop your own opinion on that. Maybe that's all I can really say about it. For that answer, that's as complete as I can give it. And with that, that's as complete as I can do right now about gay people. So until next time, when you people bombard me with a torrent of gay questions. I think that the gay agenda kicks into overdrive during the summer. Have you noticed that? It's like when kids are home more often and they're watching more TV and they're on the computer. That's when they go for it. It's a theory of mine, but not one I'm thinking too terribly hard about right now. I actually just glanced at my notes and I have one more question about the homosexual thing from Ozu, and I said I'd answer it, so I'm going to muster up the stamina to do this and answer this question. So, again, this is from Ozu, and Ozu wrote to me. The question for your next episode is, what is your opinion on the seemingly tendency for gays to turn their sexuality into a lifestyle? Why do they do this? Is it for attention? Is it their natural mindset? I see people who I'm friends with on Facebook, general social media, who have their profile centered around the fact that a person is gay, bisexual, etc. For example, constantly sharing pictures about gay rights, constantly liking pages centered around being gay, things like that. From my experience, a majority of them have this gay is more than a sexuality mindset. I'm not sure as to whether or not people who center their life around what they like to fuck or who they like to hold hands with or who they like to be themselves with, whatever they want to call it. I think it's all bullshit, but I don't know if that's their natural mindset or if that's just what people expect them to do. Maybe they're playing into that expectation rather than their mindset. That expectation that, oh, this is how you're supposed to be, this is the kind of life you're supposed to live, rather than figuring it out for themselves. So who knows? Maybe it is a natural tendency to make it known because they're insecure about it. And the people who you know on social media websites like Facebook and other platforms who always like gay related stuff and are sharing gay related things is because we in the West have this obsession with individuality. We already know what makes us the same, but we want to focus on people who do the same shit as the rest of us, but they also like to do this, and somehow that's what matters. They hold this contradictory opinion that, like that proud to play thing that I made fun of. I think it was like my first video on this YouTube channel where they're saying, "Oh, there's no room for discrimination on the field. It's only the playing that matters." Well, if it's only the playing that matters, why are you bringing up your sexual orientation? If that doesn't matter, why are you bringing it up? If sucking cock is not what gives you athletic ability, why do you bring it up? And that's because we're obsessed with what makes us different, despite the fact that what makes us different really is just superficial and stupid, if what they're saying is really true. If these people were really concerned about just being the same as everybody else, they wouldn't fucking mention it. They would carry on with their lives. They would make, say, playing soccer the most important thing, not, oh, I'm going to do this video mentioning that I'm gay. Oh, I also play soccer. But being gay doesn't have anything to do with it, but I'm gay. You see what I'm saying? It's very contradictory. So it's a very deep, deep flaw in Western thinking, and one that alienates me from a lot of people, I guess. And from the sounds of it, you don't like it either, and maybe you're in the same situation. But I don't want to put words into your mouth. We are against that here, but if that's the case for you, I definitely am sympathetic to your plight. I'm going to acknowledge some current events type questions that I've received, even though I don't talk much about them because there's a lot of contradictory information out there, and I don't have the time or patience to sift through all of it and figure out what's what, who's who, and and the general overall context in which these situations are taking place, especially with foreign policy, which is what this question is about. From Warren, with the major conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza, and the less reported on ones like the ISIS taking over Iraq and the perpetual fighting in Africa, do you think that any of these conflicts are just typical conflicts that will sizzle out in a few months with no real effect, or is the world changing for better or for worse? Also, what do you think is causing all these conflicts? I want to say that these are the end times, but I kind of want that to happen, and wishful thinking is usually not truthful thinking. So, as for why all these things are happening, I'm at a loss. I don't think that the world is changing because the story of man has always been very chaotic, and the stuff that we read in the history books is condensed, severely condensed over a. It's all like thousands of years just put into this small little textbook that you can carry in your hand. So, in retrospect, it seems all clean cut, but I think that things were chaotic like 20 years ago as they are now. Maybe they weren't so chaotic like back in the Revolutionary War days, but yeah, it's just you can't control people. You can't make people go in one direction all at the same time. So I think the world's always been in chaos. The one thing that has changed is the 24-hour news cycle. We did not have the 24-hour news cycle in like 20 years ago. In fact, I think it's like only since 9/11 happened that we've had that. And now you have Drudge Report, you have Twitter, always updating with the latest happenings. Shout out to our brothers at Happen Watch. So it just seems like all this information can be compiled. Everything is documented. And through the massive, live, constant documentation, we process it, and it's like a chaotic collage in our own head. So it seems like chaos. How could you interpret it in any other way? So thank you for the question, Warren. And now I'm going to talk about the happenings that are presently occurring in Ferguson, Missouri. That clusterfuck. So basically, the latest news I heard is that Humpty Dumpty had 6 holes in his shell, which would indicate a struggle on the behalf of both him and the officers. So apparently he was stopped for a robbery, suspected robbery, because he was reported, matched the description, and got into an altercation with the police officer. And I know police officers lie. I'm not under any illusion that all of them are noble, but if there was indication of a struggle like those 6 shots would indicate, then there you go. I mean, what is there to complain about exactly? But these are feral ghetto dwellers and liberals. They want to riot and get outraged about just about anything, no matter how stupid. They do things differently in the ghetto. I know that. It's weird. Like, you stop them and ask them a question, they fucking freak out. It is a different code of ethics that they use over there. But my anger is not so much towards the rioters. It's towards these idiot white liberals that are using this as an example of institutional racism. This is an example of some dumb fucker who committed a crime, most likely, got stopped for it, and had the audacity to think that they could get away with it. But let's absolve him of any responsibility because white people made him steal those Skittles and tea. Are you fucking kidding me? I jumped the gun a little bit. I did not read the question to which I was reacting, and there might have been another question that got lost somewhere. So if you sent me a question I didn't read it, send me another one. I'm looking for it right now. I think Trevor sent it. Yes, Trevor sent it. What are your opinions on the Ferguson riots, especially now with the information that Michael Brown, the upstanding black youth that was unjustly killed for no reason whatsoever at all, no way, Jose, had committed a robbery only a few hours earlier? So yeah, Trevor knows what's going on. Thank you for the question, Trevor, and that imaginary question, imaginary or not, somebody might have sent in something before that. So if you did, remind me because I lose track of things sometimes. I'm only human. Next question is from Nicholas. What are your predictions for the new and upcoming degenerate hobbies we can hope to see on the horizon? What new thing is on the horizon for us to learn about? I've heard about the fire challenge and Kids are really stupid. They were stupid when I was a kid. When I was in elementary, middle school, we had bomb bags. And I saw a piece on the local news about it when they were popular. Ice cream men would sell them. You know, the ice cream men who ran their ice cream trucks as a front for Al Qaeda, most likely. And they sold these bomb bags as a training, as a gateway bomb into greater things. Things that would get you a lot of virgins. But if you're not familiar, what bomb bag was is that it was like this little piece of metallic plastic. It was flat and it had something inside of it, and you'd break the thing inside of it, and this bag would be sealed, and it would actually inflate until it would blow up. And apparently, some kids got injured from it. I have no idea how. Maybe they're like holding it in their hands or something. But I used them. I played with them, and they really weren't that powerful. It was like no worse than a balloon popping. And I said metallic plastic. I meant like plastic that looks like aluminum foil. You know the kind. But that was like the stupid thing when I was little, and then like some years after that, when I was in high school, I heard about Jenkem. And if you're not familiar with Jenkem, it's essentially a you shit and piss in a bottle and you let it ferment, and then you huff it, and it apparently gets you high. Um, I think like some news story was actually faked out by this. It actually started out as a hoax, but I wouldn't be surprised if from that hoax, kids started to try it for themselves. In fact, I'm going to say that Jenkem will make a comeback. That's going to be the new degenerate thing. Jenkem, that shit will get you high. Before I head into the next question, I would like to remind you to check out the links below. Got some good stuff down there. Got some good stuff down there every week, and give them your support because they've certainly earned it, at least in my eyes. And I will give them the proper name droppage towards the end of the show. So that's all, and here is a question from Garrett. How do you feel about energy drinks? What do you think about 9 to 5 office jobs? What do you think the world is going to be like in 2019? Well, as I said to you in the message that I sent you as confirmation, I said that the idea of the world in 2019 terrifies me. It gives me bad dreams. I lack the imagination to think what these deviants will come up with next, what the next push will be, what the next means of indoctrination will be in our schools. But whatever it may be, I'm not going to be complicit in any sort of deviancy, in any sort of promotion of it. How I feel about 9 to 5 office jobs, in and of itself, they aren't bad, but just from what I hear, the modern corporate environment, what the current state of that is like, it's nothing that I want to be a part of. I hear it's very dehumanizing and emasculating and discourages actual work, actual performance, actual excelling at what you do, being good at your job. So if you can find a healthy work environment that's also a 9 to 5 job, that's a good thing, you know. If you can find it, they seem to be increasingly rare as time goes on. I don't devalue intellectual labor. I just think there needs to be more of a premium placed on physical labor, blue collar labor. I think that fosters a healthy masculinity. And you mentioned energy drinks. I have not had an energy drink in quite a while, but my favorite is this kind that you get at Winco. It's like cheap 99 cents. I've even got them for like 69 cents before. It's called Wired or something. I think that's what it's called, but yeah, I like that. Energy drinks are one of the few drinks that actually have sour flavors, and I like sour things, so some energy drinks are cool. Certainly not something you want to have regularly, however. So now on the question checklist, I can check off a question about energy drinks. Put that one next to the one I answered about Krispy Kreme donuts. question. It's from Evan. As a modern Christian man, what are your thoughts on pornography and masturbation? Do you think the widespread access to it has been harmful to our society? There was once a view held by at least some liberals in the past that said that pornography is rape. And I don't disagree with that because it is an exploitation of girls who had some trauma in their past. And of course the porn industry is very Jewish dominated, and that certainly has a lot to do with the nature of it. So I have a lot of problems with pornography because of those aforementioned things. And yes, they have had the porn industry and the obsession over masturbation has had a very negative effect on society. Sexual relief and gratification through such strange artificial means heightens the sense of narcissism that so very much defines our generation. And I think a manifestation of that is the fact that so many people are accepting of gay marriage and are sympathetic to homosexuality, because I think that and narcissism are one and the same, and pornography seems to have done a lot to lead us in that direction. And I'm not making that up. That's not bullshit. There was a study done on pornography usage and political proclivities with regard to at least gay marriage. I don't remember if they measured other things, but it's certainly worth reading. It's very interesting. So I'm going to have to find a link to that and share it with you fine people if I find the time to do so. So I don't see any good that comes from pornography and the fixation on masturbation because of what it exploits, what it makes money off of, and what it does to the population. I know that a lot of these answers seem to be leading to the same place, but they're all what I sincerely believe to be true. I talk about how society is very complex and we can't deal with that. We're too self-oriented and we have a lot of dysgenic breeding. And here's a question about dysgenic breeding from Kellen. You talk about dysgenic breeding quite often. What action would you suggest we take, and if that action be extreme, how can one morally justify extreme action for a future that may or may not happen? To first address the end of that question, I think the future is now. It's not something that will happen, it's something that already has happened. Just watch daytime TV if you ever get the opportunity to. Look how long that daytime TV hosts have been on TV. Those people can't have a job if there's not a well of filth from which to draw. And that filth can only survive if there's a largesse from which to take, which is the charity from the taxpayer. These people are undoubtedly on EBT and getting Section 8 housing to some varying degree. And I use the term dysgenic breeding as a counter to eugenic breeding. Now, obviously, eugenics has other connotations, but the stock is either getting worse or it's getting better. And I don't think that there's any way that you can say that we're getting better. If you're one of those I fucking love science kinds of people, yeah, you might think like, yeah, we have all these cool gadgets and inventions and scientific developments, but what are they doing? They're just keeping alive people that shouldn't be alive. They're extending the lives of that which should die earlier. And it's not as if we're saving future Leonardo da Vinci's from dying at an early age. I don't think that there could be anything close to a Da Vinci in our time. If he were alive in 2014, he'd probably be medicated into a stupor. But in order to stop dysgenic breeding from happening, you have to end the welfare state. People who can't afford their own food and shelter really are not worth keeping around. And that's the most minimum standard that you can have. Yet we do away with that standard. We tell people, if you fuck up, we'll bail you out. It's no problem. You deserve it. You've hit a rough patch. I understand there's a rough patch, but if your whole fucking life's a rough patch, you are the rough. There is no rough patch. You're just a rough. There is no fairway on your golf course of life. So in order to prevent the stupidest among us from breeding, there's always going to be stupid people that breed, because there's stupid people and then there's fucking stupid. Stupid people are at least functional. But the stupidest people, you take away their free food and shelter and and you'll see things improve, but there's no political will to make that happen. So enjoy the decline. I have a lot of questions about religion, so let's answer some of those. This one is from Shit Memes, page on Facebook. From what I've heard of the podcast, you seem to be a reasonable and logical person, ignoring political correctness and pleasantries in place of facts. In the context of a respectful conversation between a non religious person and yourself, how would you explain why you believe in God? Thank you for the compliment, Shit Memes. I'm glad that I can come off as a reasonable person on this show. As for how I would explain why I believe in God, it's a highly personal thing. It's something you have to experience yourself in order to fully understand. Because everybody has a point in their life where they're really down and depressed and are basically alone. And if you don't believe in God, there's really nothing to look forward to. There is no sense of hope or redemption in the absence of God. And for this reason, I don't think that children can be truly religious. They haven't experienced enough things in life to inform their spirituality. Because I wasn't too sure about God when I was younger, and it wasn't until much later that I became sure of the existence of God. So how I would explain it to a non-religious person, and they can take this advice or not, or they can take my words to heart or not, but I know this to be true. You have to experience enough of life, both good and bad. And it's usually the bad where you start to come out of it and say, wow, maybe there is a God. Because I was without God for a long time and it wasn't good. But I started listening for it. I started to take time to reflect. And I was eventually able to hear God. And not hear in the something goes in your ears and your brain processes it kind of thing. Something you hear in your soul. And that's why I say it's highly personal. It's something that really cannot be explained. So have an open heart, have an open mind to the presence of the divine in your life. And I think most people find it. If they're truly sincere about finding it, they will find it. I wish I could articulate my belief in God a little bit better as to why I came to the conclusion that I did, because it's a very powerful feeling. It's just not something that you can put in a worldly term. Next one is from Sean. Your views on neo-pagans. Why do you think they claim to be pagans when there are countless of religions that their ancestors might have practiced, such as cults of fertility to Greco-Roman? It seems that neo-pagans are just people who grew up alone in the spiritual sense or in the cultural sense, where they were allowed to seek out any sort of strange ideas, novel ideas, and were drawn to them and made them integral to who they are. People who actually grew up in some sort of traditional community or culture tend to not be drawn to these strange ideas that neo-paganism offer. So I don't know why they believe what they believe as opposed to the things that their ancestors believed, which would be fine, but it would still be very strange because while they are their ancestors in blood, they're definitely not their ancestors in practice. And in absence of anything else, that's what their ancestors did. But the culture has evolved to that where if you started practicing it now, you'd be alienating a lot of people, and they don't seem to have a problem with that. So I think that neo-paganism is just a product of personal social atomization and extreme individualism. This next question is from Kyle. I want your take on agnosticism, loss of faith at a young age, and of course, edgy teenage Satanism. Like I said, when I was younger, I had it's basically baby's first existential crisis, a loss of faith. And I was certainly no different, and I think that a lot of people aren't any different. Certainly some people avoid that, but that's not what we're talking about. I just think it's a natural development of the spirit where you end up losing the sense of God, and not that it was very strong to begin with, but it came back very strong, certainly for me in my specific situation. And I think agnosticism is also a part of that spiritual development where maybe you're not quite sure about it, and that's fine. Doubting is fine. That's a part of faith, despite what some people say. In that case, you do have to doubt a little bit in order to strengthen your belief in something. As for edgy teenage Satanism, it's just kids who are trying to piss off their parents, test the boundaries of acceptability, and hopefully they grow out of it. And I think they usually do. I don't think there are too many adult Satanists. Um, I'll have to check the numbers on that, but yeah, it'd be preferable if they didn't go through that. But it's teenage rebellion that manifests itself in many different ways, and Satanism is certainly one of them. Next question about religion is from Dingus. He wrote to me, "Do you think religions besides Christianity could work as well in helping the human race?" Well, I don't see too many Jewish and Muslim missionaries going around and helping out people in poorer countries. So just from a pure mathematical standpoint, I don't think they're doing much at all. And certainly, you could say that blowing up buses and suicide bombing is doing something. I don't know how that's helping anybody, but there you go. Basically, I find every other religion antithetical to my way of life, so I believe what I believe for a reason. And I've certainly met other people of different faiths who I've gotten along with, but we never talked about religion or anything. Why would we? We don't have that in common. I knew a Jewish family that went to my church when I was a kid, and they were fine people, good, upstanding folks, and but they weren't religious Jews, obviously, and I have a lot of problem with Judaism. So yeah, I don't think if I believed that other religions could help it, I'd be some Unitarian Universalist, which I find to be the worst of them all. I find it interesting that a lot of the questions I get are about my belief in God, or what I believe about other religions, what I think about other religions. Is it really that prevalent that people are open with their disbelief in a higher power now? That actually believing in a higher power is like a is like an alternative kind of viewpoint that's interesting to people. It seems that letting go of the self is almost an act of rebellion now, and that's very strange to me. Very, very strange times we live in. But hey, we're all in this together, right? If you're listening to this, trying to make sense of this crazy world we live in. If Obama had a son, he'd look like Joe Mixon. He a good boy, he didn't do nothing. Next question is from Frankie. What are your thoughts on the Common Core learning standards that are being implemented in public school districts nationwide? I'm currently a junior in high school and they have officially implemented it in my county. Is there anything that can be done to combat it? I saw a video posted about the developer of the Common Core who basically said Common Core exists only to debase white people and teach them about white privilege. So that tells you everything you need to know about it right there. I can't say how I really feel about how we should fight it because that would be illegal and I would probably get arrested. But this is what happens when you allow teachers and schools to be like the parents instead of parents. Lazy asses, all of them. And teachers are, it's teaching the profession is basically like welfare for the average IQ. It's basically a job that is not a job. It's just to say, well, you're kind of smart, you shouldn't be on the street, so here, have this easy do nothing job. So every kid gets funneled into it because parents are lazy and, or they're strung up at work doing some stupid bullshit for somebody else, and kids see these teachers as an authority clearly and they learn all these awful ideas. So they're sympathetic to the system when they grow up and have kids. I would say homeschooling or private school would be the answer to get around Common Core, but there's standardized testing that colleges will now accept that I'm reading here. So even if you're in public and private school, you're going to have to study the same shit. And I think that is incredibly dangerous given what they're trying to do. So you just better hope that the next president wants to repeal this shit, or somebody in Congress, somebody in the Senate wants to repeal it, but they don't actually do anything. So That won't actually get them votes. Next question is from Trey. Trey writes, what do you think of people constantly using autistic as an insult? You don't need to answer this in an episode since it was already addressed, but I'd like to hear your opinion on it. Yeah, this is a question that I asked, but apparently not a question that was asked to me, question that I answered, and apparently it was worded wrong, so I guess I'll answer it again. Autistic is simply the new nerd or geek or loser amongst people who are more in the loop, in the know about things. Or the more catch-all term is, you're doing something I don't like, so I'm going to call you a name. Everybody does this because everybody takes the path of least resistance, as we've established, and the path of least resistance is stupid. This next question is from Jack. Create an IRL band named Cheap Filth or Common Trick. A question for the next podcast. What is Cheap Trick's best album? I would like to listen to them, but I have no idea where to start. Start with their first album. It's self-titled and it was released in 1977. They have two self-titled albums. One was released in 77, one in 97. Both are good, but the first one is essential, and just work your way around from there. I actually prefer their newer material against their old material, but their old material is great, and you should not avoid it. Next question is a long one. It's from Audio Memes. Apparently, it's a new Facebook page, or an old one. I haven't checked it out yet, but I will after I record this. So, here's what Audio Memes has to say. Through discovering your page and other pages like Friendship 2, Stick Memes, Humanity 3, and the slew of other meme pages, I started my own page called Audio Memes. It was kind of a thing to make stupid content with my friends, but one thing struck me in particular. Fairly often I see meme pages sharing other pages, which is good, and it all seems pretty exclusive. A lot of the admins are admin to more than one page, which generally seem to bring fan bases of existing pages to those other pages. And again, admins of larger pages who are made admins of smaller pages would be inclined to share those smaller pages, which generally leads them to getting a larger fan base. I was just wondering your thoughts on this and whether or not, even with the fact that meme pages are dying, it stunts the growth of pages who don't really know the admins from the larger pages. And a quick tidbit at the end. Do you think that pages like the Cringe Channel are helping the death of other meme pages? I mean, it started alright, but the Cringe Channel and Attention Seekers Incorporated page just seem to be pandering to their Fedora audience, and that the majority of the blogs they bash and try to rip apart are satire pages, evidenced by the Luda La Luna page. Yeah, I know what you mean with the Cringe Channel and stuff like that. I like the Cringe Channel, okay? I'm not familiar with Attention Seekers Incorporated, if that's related to the privilege checkers folks. So, but on Tumblristas, I do my best to show you the common degenerate, the common filth, as it were, because usually if they try too hard, yeah, it trips the satire trigger, and usually right when I post it, I realize, oh god, that was satire. So I try to keep as much of that off the page as possible. But I don't think they're necessarily killing it, killing our little corner of the web. It's just that Facebook is now limiting the reach for almost every page. Like, I know this because a lot of pages that I like aren't showing up anymore. I actually have to type in their name if I want to see their new content. But you talked about the incestuousness of from bigger pages, smaller page, and there's like a level of entropy. But if you're just going to look at it like that, like admins from other pages, of course they're not going to have a priority on what you're doing. I think pages are a very personal thing, and asking for admin on a page is just stupid because you're going to likely have a very different personality from those people, and you're just not going to fit. But I'm not saying you're doing that. I just thought I'd mention it, and because since we're on the subject. But just keep doing what you're doing, post good content, and the fan base will grow organically. I know that shares help a lot, but a lot of the time it's a friend of a friend who finds a page and likes it because they trust that friend's taste in things. So while it does help to know bigger pages, it really doesn't help too much. Like, I know being noticed by Senpai a little bit, they're like 5 times bigger than our page, and you know they've shared our stuff a few times, but we're different, you know. We're friendly. We appreciate each other's pages, but you know we're different, and so I don't get much from them. They don't get much from me. So we're almost running parallel to each other. There's very little overlap. So knowing people has a little bit to do with it, but it's not all of it. If you're not unique in any way, and I'm sure that you are, if you let your personality shine through the page, then people will be attracted to it because it will be unique. And that's really all you can ask for, and it'll grow from there. So that's my bit of advice for you. So with that, I'm out of questions, but the show is not over. I still got some stuff I'd like to talk about. Blake has a question next week, and Harley has a question for next week. I've been meaning to get to Harley's for the last 2 weeks now, I believe, but it's about transgenderism, and I'm all tapped out about aberosexuals. I have little to talk about right now because I'm just, I'm just tired of it. Not tired of Harley, but just tired of the whole subject. But anyway, I get fan art every week, and I mention it usually at the beginning of the episode, but I didn't this week, so I'd like to give it a special mention now. You saw art from Massey, who sent in a question last week, I believe. Got one from Dingus, who has done the last few episodes, and Robert, who did the Guy Fieri one. So thank you to you, and thanks to Jarrell Villanueva. I think that's how you pronounce it. That's the sole musical entry that we got this week. So thank you. I've linked their Facebooks and SoundClouds below, at least those that have like Facebook pages. Seriously, guys, if you want to send in, like, if you do art, make a Facebook page, give yourself a cool name or whatever, and that way I can link it, because I don't want to link personal Facebook accounts. I'm against that. But I said that I had some exciting news yesterday on Full House Memes 2. And that exciting news is that I'm currently developing a new series that will be uploaded to this YouTube channel. I'm not going to give any details right now, other than the fact that I'm working on it. And first thing, next episode, episode 8, which will be next week, next Tuesday, I will talk about it in depth, what it's going to be. So stay tuned for that, and keep sending in your questions at my email address, which is commonfilth@commonfilth.com. You can inbox me on YouTube, or you can message me on any of my Facebook pages if you came from there, which you most likely did. So, as always, thank you for listening. This is Common Filth Radio, and I will see you next week.